Alrighty, good afternoon, good evening, and good day. This is Jonathan Albin with NycosRPG, and today is just another day in Mercia. We're going to be talking about that country in rather extreme terms today, talking about the nation, not only from its inception and its position and evolution in the story of the world of Nykos, but also from the standpoint of what that nation represents in the modern era of roleplay. If you are new to the channel, thank you for being here. We talk about nothing but roleplay, and we do so in a bunch of different ways. Generally, we're referring to the mechanisms of roleplay, but in today's episode and in others like this in the Just Another Day series, we actually look into the world of Nykos and look at it through its history. I am Jonathan Albin. I've been a game master for 50 years. I was, when I was only 11 years old, I was introduced to my buddy's Grandpa Dave, and Grandpa Dave was Dave Arneson, and I learned to play Dungeons and Dragons from one of the guys that designed the game, and I've been GMing nonstop for 50 years. So that's at least an average of one session per week for all of my existence. So that's quite a hefty time period to be a game master, and we'll get into more of the story in a minute. But before we do that, I want to let you know today is Stores Day. I look at every day of the week, and I look at them in a different perspective. And my Thursdays are my Stores Days, and this is when the retail store owners are at the forefront of my mind, and I'm thinking about how their businesses are going. And in particular, I want to use this to shout out for Board Game Paradise, the store that I work with on a weekly basis. They're in Redlands, California, about 20 minutes from me and about 50 minutes from anybody in the LA basin. So if you have not learned to play role-play games yet, why don't you stop by Board Game Paradise on Monday nights, Tuesday nights from 6 p.m. Pacific time until 10 Pacific, or perhaps stop by on Saturdays. Now, in this week in particular, Board Game Paradise is celebrating its its anniversary. I think it's their third. I might be wrong about that. They've been at the location for quite a while, so I can't remember the exact year. So Rich can beat me up tomorrow when I see him. But in the meantime, the event on Saturday that I'm running is Mega Monopoly. So if you've thought you didn't like Monopoly before, I trust me, I'm going to be introducing a completely different way to play. So feel free to stop by then. It's a multiplayer team-based game mechanism that we're going to be introducing, something that of my own creation, and we're going to be doing that special for the store. And they went so far as they've actually got the Redlandsopoly board. So we're going to be playing with the actual cities in the streets in the city in which we're playing. So if you want to be part of that special thing, come out for the Board Game Paradise birthday party on Saturday. We'll be starting around 4 in the afternoon. So if you do stop by Board Game Paradise anytime between now and then, make sure you let them know that NycosRPG brought you, because I've been advocating for them to become a sponsor for this year, as they have in the past, and we haven't yet finalized that yet. So, all right, I did my part for the store. So we're going to be talking today about the Kingdom of Mercia. Those of you that have Monty Python backgrounds and are familiar with the where in the world Mercia really is, this is the Nykos Mercia, and we're going to be going through its evolution. So why don't we get started by heading over to the map room. Alrighty, so here in the map room we have the map of Nykos. This is the most currently accessible map for the players, and so this will be rife with quite a few Easter eggs for my players. So if you are an advocate for finding out new information and discovering the secrets in a new world, Nykos is the place and Mercia is the position. If you notice, the green check mark this week is way down here at the bottom. Where's my hand? I'm looking at my map. Down that way. No. That way. Trying to do it with the scale and on that and the reversal of the image, yeah, forget about it. It's about the middle of the map, but on the southern coast of the continent of Greenland. And as you can see, the capital is mostly covered over, and that is the capital city of Mercania. And as we've done in the other episodes, we're going to be going over the locale step by step and describing how it applied in different iterations. But I do want to do something as a new feature this week, which is to add some serious Easter eggs to it. And that is we're going to be providing some lore and details about Mercania that are not on the map and are not yet available. So players, pay attention. All right, so let me hop down here to the details section, then we'll come back and use this as our conversational space as we go over the histories. But before that, okay, so we are going to be looking at the nation of Mercania. It is known as the Sellsword Rialto, as it is the singular nation that provides absolutely loyal, and that's absolutely not absolutely, so forgive me while I fix this piece right here. I can't believe I did that. Yikes. Absolutely. That's horrible. Come on, keyboard. Absolutely. There we go. Absolutely loyal mercenaries and sellswords into nations across all of Nykos. This is an important detail because the very concept of mercenary generally suggests someone that will go to the highest bidder. But in the case of the nation of Mercania, since they've been doing it as a cultural agreement for all of their existence, there has not been a situation in history so far wherein somebody was able to counterbid against the initial prices set by the Mercanians. And they've also been called a bunch of different names throughout history. Now here's the part that's going to be kind of the Easter eggy portion. If you notice, there's a list of names up here on the right-hand side, and these are the names of the cities known to exist and the communities known to exist in the kingdom of Mercania. And the kingdom itself is fairly large area. If we go back to the map for a second, see if that door will open. All right, so here in the map room, Mercania is the majority of the southern coast, clear to the west, almost to directly south of the Tio Ra site, and to the east, almost to Time Rack Cove. So it's a pretty large expanse of the terrain. And by the way, there was an Easter egg right there for those of you that are familiar with our buddy Abletop. Abletop's central location in the world of Nykos is Time Rack Cove. Hint, hint. See where that is. But in that area, therefore, are these facilities that we're going to talk about a little bit. Last home is the localized term. The island of Patagonia is the larger term. Patagonia is an island just off the coast of Murcia. And at that location is the retirement facilities for the family Roberts and many other famous beings and people of history. But everyone knows that the first Red Pirate Roberts has retired as living like a king in Patagonia. So there you have it. He actually is associated with the hold at Last Home. There's also Meerschen, the City of Splendors. It is the largest singular mobile marketplace in the entire world of Nykos. And literally, it said that if there's anything to be bought or sold in the world of Nykos, it will be in the markets of Meerschen. So we'll come back to that at a later point when we talk about the actual crossover position in terms of iteration. There's also Mer Akon, the Grand Syrah, and the Maracan is, it's the place, if you will, that the connection between the modern era of humanity and the previous iterations of humanity really have its connection. It is considerably south of its namesake. Maracan is the source for the name of Megadon, which is a city farther north. But this place is known as the Grand Syrah, and I'll explain how that came to be in a few minutes. The biggest Easter egg in this list is, of course, the fact that for the first time in iterational history, the city-state of Abax has been mentioned, and it is a subject city to the rulers of the United States of America, and Abax is a instrumental place both in the now period of the history of Nykos and the 8th iteration, and we'll come back to that. There's actually a tie-in into modern era as well, which was actually mentioned in one of our previous Nykos Nightly News, brought to you by the Gnome News Network. There is a tie-in there to this city of Abax, but we'll cover that perhaps in a later episode, or maybe my players will bring it out and reveal it. Of course, there is the establishment of the United States of America, who lay claim to several inland locations along the Mercanian coast, and their actual round table is in Mercia itself, and that's where individuals can actually plea for their lives and ask for the protections of the knights of the round table there, and of course that would be calling for Mercia. But all right, so then we finally go to the kingdom's name of Mercania, and yes, Mercania is a city-state. That central city has had name changes throughout the iterations. And so as we now go into the history of Nykos and the origins of this city and its development, I think you'll see where we will make references back to these names as we go along. Alrighty, so we are talking about Just Another Day in, oh, it's even got the wrong name still in it. Let me get that fixed. Goodness gracious. Didn't think I'd made that mistake. Oops. Dooby-dooby-doo. Alrighty. There we go. Just another day in Mercania. Boy, I didn't put that in the right spot, did I? Oh well. That will work. All right. So, as we mentioned, Mercania is an old culture. It's been involved in the majority of the wars throughout the various iterations, spanning all the way back till the 2nd iteration. It can't go any further back than that because it wasn't discovered until the expansion of the map in the 1976-78 time frame, when the map as we know it today was established. Until then, Mercania had not even been a human outpost, although that soon became what it was most famous for. It was the extreme number of mercenary soldiers that it would provide for the armies of the second iteration and beyond, became legendary. Originally, the name of the area was Tylos. You know, the range around it was referred to as the Tylos ranges, and there were quite a few persons who raised livestock that vied for control, and so there were quite a few border conflicts, and this is how the soldiers of the major capital, which was at the time simply called Merkin, and if you have worked out the wordplay there, you can throw things at me because I was only 11 and 12 years old, so 13 years old, give me a break. But the city-state of Merkin that was providing the access to these mercenaries also ran two of the greatest soldiering academies in the world. And while they were competitive, they were also collaborative because they were actually administered by two of my earliest player advocates. In the one case, it was Feldemir the Grey, who was a first iteration champion, who in his retirement days asked to be included in the stories that I was going to be game mastering as we were parting company. As you may recall, I personally moved more than 40 times before I was 18. I went to 22 different grade schools and 6 different high schools across 11 different states. And that prospect of crisscrossing the country meant that since that player was going to be staying in his hometown and his family had been there his entire life, and he was more than likely going to take over a job in his father's business, even as a tween, so to speak, we were only 12, 13, 14, he kind of knew he would be staying in that area. Ironically, I later found that player is still around, and so if you are out there watching right now, Jerry Backstrom, I'll call you out personally. Jerry, if you're watching this, I'd love for you to connect with us because I'd love to tie your player character story more deeply into this. But I do remember that your mage's name was Feldemir, and that persona existed for decades thereafter as a merchant of Tylos and responsible for transferring military units to support the various wars. During the second iteration, as you may recall, and you may not, as you may not recall, the primary conflict was between the dragons that were still surviving on the planet and their allies, in opposition to the trolls and ogres who were later going to be known as the Urgluk, as they kind of lost their identity and instead merged with the intent of destroying dragonkind. In the world of Nykos, therefore, instead of it being the classic giants versus dragons that the D&D franchise would eventually pursue, instead it was a conflict between these Urgluk and the dragons, mainly on the basis that the Urgluk were deceptive and cruel and would steal the dragon's eggs and capture their young and all of that. And so therefore, even though dragons were still considered to be seriously dangerous beasts, the Urgluk were having truck with and transfer of value within the dragon population, and that just didn't sit well with the other kingdoms that had made alliances with dragonkind. So throughout the second iteration time frame, although Mercania was not a visitable location, players didn't go there. Nonetheless, they would send their delegations to the embassies of the Mercanians to petition for the use of their soldiery. And that was where the beginnings of the mercenary angle of the city-state of Tylus began. So, as I mentioned, Feldemir was operating one of the schools, and the other school was being administered by a persona whose name was Rocky Bullwinkle. And he was an interesting persona. The player really was focused on the idea of utilizing an animal species as a playable species, but he did it in a very unique way. We got him into a situation in a conflict where his persona, as Rocky, picked a fight that he couldn't win and was on the brink of destruction when his adventuring party petitioned for a reincarnation to bring him back from the brink, and he was remanifested thereafter as a moose person. So he was fundamentally a bipedal moose who could carry weapons, very much similar to a minotaur, what I later called Tarmakians, but he was a very gentle, kind-hearted being, and yet he was a menace on the battlefield. So he established the other school of training, and so it's little wonder that the area just north of Mercania and of the city Mercia itself, the kingdom of Neomoria formed, and eventually would become the center of Sekgen culture in the lands of the West. So Graulin's city center for people of the Sekgen population, that is the second genesis, animal-human hybrids basically, or uplifted animals, more to the point, came to be established in the areas of Neomoria, just north of Mercia. And so there was quite a bit of transfer of soldiery throughout the iterations thereafter. As a matter of fact, it was in Neomoria that the first of the Tarmaks, well in advance, and I use the term Tarmak to represent the Minotaurs, because in the cultures of Nykos, the Tarmakians actually raised themselves from being the barbaric species known for being bloodthirsty monsters, as the Minotaurs had been in myth and legend, to being actually a much more peaceful, arboreal and nature-relating species, operating under herd mentality and creating some of the best defending soldiers in the world. So in the one case, you've got Feldemir's hyper-aggressive soldiery being traded to those with the deep pockets, and conversely, those countries who were compelled to bring on martial defenders supporting themselves through the Bullwinkle's eventual school of training. So, second iteration, fun period. As the second iteration ended, the name of Mercania, which was, of course, at that point, Tylus, became adjusted, and that's because the city-state concept had overtaken the national concept as originally defined, and so the area all along that southern coast was populated by fundamentally what you would consider them to be settlers from other regions who had simply come south for the verdant fields, the opportunity to work with these military units to do some of the mining for them and to establish their merchant trails for the goods that they would need to continue to operate as the sellsword Rialto. So in this new manifestation, the actual capital of Mercania did switch from the city of Mercan to the city of Maerschen, because it was now necessary for them to establish other trades, because the wars had depleted their population so badly during the second iteration. As the third iteration began and the human population had almost wasted away to nothing. The localized populations surged as new immigrants to the area came in, and Mayerson became this hodgepodge monstrosity of a marketplace, developing its own mechanisms. As a matter of fact, the very concepts of rogues guilds really established themselves in Mayerson. There were at one point up to 20 different guilds operating within the established boundaries of the market, even though the market didn't have any formal boundaries, and it actually extended from the coast on the south all the way to Neomoria at one point. You pretty much couldn't walk 100 yards without passing a half dozen marketplaces and traders all the way along that major road. And so in that third iteration, quite a few nefarious deeds and exploits were centered in this region. The first major criminal element becoming a kingdom occurred in this period. The very first of what later became known as the Xanathar, the very first beholder-based rogues gallery formed within the boundaries. Not that I'm giving away any hints or anything, I don't suppose, but in that third iteration, the critical nature of one of the black books of Adam actually crossed through the market because a well-known trader by the name of, give me a second, I'll remember which one he was. I can see him. I can see his image. He's 7 feet tall, very gaunt, slow walking, very deliberate. Name starts with an M. I'll think of it in a second, or maybe my players will remind me in tomorrow, or in next week's games. But why can't I remember it? That's because I've got another Eldrin name on my mind that I don't want to say, that isn't part of this. But at any rate, this trader was robbed, and the Book of Adam was actually stolen in the third iteration by opportunists who to this day have never been discovered. So it's a major concern that there is a Black Book of Adam now loose, with the theft occurring in the third iteration. I need not say any more beyond that point. I will, except to say that yes, this individual is also known for his blueprints for the Nimbles, the NYMBL, MBULs, those clockwork mechanical devices that inevitably were carrier devices for explosives, prismatic bombs during the 7th iteration. I still see the guy, but I can't think of his name. It's going to kill me. I'll remember here in a second. If I think about the other rogue in town, I might be able to remember his name. At any rate, into the 4th iteration we go, and with it moved from the 4th iteration to the 3rd iteration to the 4th, and the establishment of the Dogs of War in those early days of the 4th iteration, the need for Mayerson to be focused on rogues activity went away. With the advent of the ballad that changed the world in the later days of that, or the early days of that 4th iteration, the need for military arms across all nations skyrocketed, as for the first time the what had been covert attacking forces of the Yarlum made themselves first known, and the battle became an open war. And for the majority of the fourth iteration, the capital city had become, the nation had become known as the Americans, and because of the demand for noble-led forces, the United States of America were formed. And yes, they were utilizing the red, white, and blue. They had appropriated several images from the location known as the Landing, and I'm sure my deep lore players will now go looking for where the Landing might be. This is in the few short months before the first destruction of Nyx. So the concept of these knighted states of America meant that there were more than one now city-state, and while they did operate under independent names, the Revening, which occurred in the 7th iteration, or in the now, actually led to the plundering of those names and the loss of them altogether. So we have very little on the the separate knighted states, but we do know of the order as a whole, because their military force was also one of the first ones to use the early prototype versions of the wands of automatic missile fire. They were shoulder fire weapons that non-magi could use to invoke a certain number of magic missile attacks in a given day. And they were quite efficient and quite devastating, and the United States didn't prefer to use them. They were, of course, very honorable and wanted to engage in hand-to-hand combat, and quite often they would do open challenges rather than have their oppositions actually face off with their standing army, just because of its devastation capability. But just realize that those early weapons were highly unstable, and there were a great many of the soldiery of the Americans who died in that period. So following the 4th iteration, even though it had been highly profitable, the nation of Mercia ran into a real problem because of that battle I mentioned before. Let me go back for a second and look at the intro screen. Oops, nope. No, details. Details, yes. Oh, Marakan. Yeah, in the city of Marakan, which was a city half built over the ocean, because the mortals were dabbling in suboceanics as well. Their capital, known as the Grand Zara, was literally Ground Zara for a reason. And at the end of the 4th iteration, they were obliterated, and the majority of the mortal population of all of the southeastern quadrant of Growlin were eliminated in the devastation of that attack. It was apparently predicated by the discovery of several weapons of the mortals that had been squirreled away in the mountains of Cryopathia. Oh, did I say that out loud? My players might find that interesting as well, given a few places that they have already explored in the North Country. But just to know that Marakan was the last time that the United States of America is mentioned, and it's literally just a few decades later that the city of a box which was a kingdom of crypts, became known because there were quite a few people that were sending their loved ones to a box for their interment into what would later be the greatest necropolis on Nykos. Unfortunately, the location of a box was apparently lost for the majority of time from the they were aware of it during the 6th, but very few cared to bother with it. But in the beginning of the 7th iteration, and especially at the tailing ends of the period known as the Now, it was noted that the soon-to-be-named king of the gnomes, and yes, his name will go down forever in honor and or infamy as Cush de Longpipe, and good King Cush had entered the world in the adventure in terms of being discovered in a box under the city of what was then known as Cauldron, later known as Potiphar, and now currently known as Caldera. With underneath that kingdom, in a box, from a box, was King Cush de Longpipe, who then later gained great honor and respect for opening the boundaries, reestablishing Jadaroon as a gnomish paradise on the slopes of the Mountain of Cauldron. And, well, the rest you could say is history, but it's not yet, because there are still people in the city who are enjoined, and so I'm not going to be revealing too much about that location. Just know that the connection between a box and current adventures is very real, despite the players not having access to the region any longer, or yet I should say. So finally, we're coming up on the sliding into the second half of the show, and so I want to talk a little bit more about the 6th iteration. During the 6th iteration, it was very near to Mercania that the adventuring parties first landed. The site known as Hammerfall is just southwest of Timerack Cove, and it was at Hammerfall that the adventuring party landed. And for the first time in about 4 iterations, the party could number its population as mostly mortals. They had their captain's name was Armstrong. Their navigator was, I'm trying to remember them, Grissom, and their pilot was Aldrin. And as you can see where the names came from, they were very much playing into the lines, or the originating lines of the concept of Planet of the Apes. And they landed in an area that was predominantly operated by the SecGen, because, of course, just north of here and outside of the wastes of the destruction of Marakan is what was then known as Neomoria. And the kingdom now known as Moria was Neomoria, and was even then a haven for the second Genesis. And many of their adventures dealt with the interaction and interplay between the various species during that time frame. And it is in this period of time that good King Ash and his entourage, including Stormcrow, the intriguing Inandarin elf, came to power, and during their reign as the sole enjoined, they were able to put to rights many of the challenges that had befallen humanity over the years, including the overthrowing of the document known before that to as the Pact. And there are many tales about that will still be echoing in modern era, and does have much to do with the concept of free trade in wide swaths of the world of Nykos. And yes, that phrase does have a really heavy asterisk hanging in the air behind it. And that also is a story that my players would be more than glad to tell you about. Alrighty, we are coming up on the end of this episode, and before we do that, I do want to talk in a minute in a form of a debrief about the game and the world of Nykos. If you are not familiar with the world about which I'm speaking, it's probably because you haven't played in a game with me. Now, that might not be as unlikely as you might think. I did mention that I moved more than 40 times before I was 18. I went to 22 different grade schools, 6 different high schools, and I started playing Dungeons and Dragons when I was 11, and so that would have put me right in, I believe, the 4th, 5th grade time frame. And so all those other moves after that, I probably played games with 1,000 or 2,000 people. So it's possible that you may have actually played in an adventure in Nykos and didn't even know it. I do know that I've got players I've had contact with that live in Colorado. I've got players that I know of that live in Kansas, in North Texas, in Western Arizona. So there's a possibility that you've played Nykos with me at some point. The story of this world is a 12,000-year tale that was 50 years in the making. I've run the iterations of Nykos now fully 8 times, and with the launch of NycosRPG, the game mechanisms that I devised, we are beginning the 9th iteration. And so the players that are in the stories now are actually living and walking in the same world where Easter eggs were dropped by my groups when I was 11 and 12 and 13, groups when my son was first born, when he was 15, when he was married, and so on and so on. So there is a lot going on. NycosRPG is a skills-oriented, elegant, and intuitive role-playing experience. It allows for player-driven progression. Game Master has nothing to do with where the players take their stories individually. The games are dialogue-driven and cinematic in terms of play because it is in the theater of the mind. We very rarely will actually change elevation and play with miniatures, although it does happen from time to time. But it is definitely operating in a system that is not your clumsy old system, and the difference between the two is absolutely fun. There are so many ways that you can take your adventure and just go. So there'll be more about that information for you. If you want to understand more about the game itself, check out NycosRPG.com. There you can purchase the product, and there's even a quick play version downloadable for free, so take advantage of that. I will be doing additional Learn How to Play episodes in the future, so watch for those. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave comments in our YouTube page's comment section, because every video I do, I also put up on YouTube shortly thereafter. And if you can, at some point, join with us here on why did my brain fart? On Twitch, realize that one of the big benefits is that if you subscribe to the Twitch channel, there are no commercials on Twitch. If you pay that, you get to bypass the commercials. So think of that as a real benefit to come and watch the shows live. And as an added benefit, you can then leave comments and chat with me directly. If you want more interaction, you can also join our patreon.com and patreon.com/Nykos, N-Y-C-O-S. And from there, you gain access to our Discord channel. And our Discord channel affords you the opportunity to actually play via live stream, well, on Discord, with the idea that we will eventually be going to broadcast the shows as well. So there's a lot going on and a lot you can be a part of. The last thing I want to mention is if you want more lore about the world of Nykos than what you're getting in my little fits and starts here in just another day, check out NycosRPG.info. That is my World Anvil page, and that's where a majority of my lore is currently stored as we're going through the process of getting this all published. Watch for more about all of this at NycosRPG.com, and also here on Twitch. We're on Mondays through Fridays, 10 a.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Pacific, Monday through Friday. And then we also have our live sessions at Board Games Paradise, the store that's celebrating its birthday this weekend, and also on Saturdays going forward after that, Role Play Roulette, a special play experience where you get to play test all of the upcoming NycosRPG system books before they're released. So thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you in our next episode. We will be back on tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I'm going to be talking about, what did I decide to talk about? I don't know. I've got so many ideas to do videos on that they are literally percolating on my brain. But if there's something you want to have included when this goes on to YouTube, make sure that you leave a comment. Let me know what you'd like to see. More information that you want, more that I want to share. I'm Jonathan Albin. This has been NycosRPG, and this has been just another day in Mercia. And have a good day.